No! No!
It wasn't a nightmare. It was real. My sleep was disturbed multiple times during the night. I woke up a little crumpy, but I had no time to be in a bad mood. I had to figure out how I could defend us. I knew that creatures would come for us, so it was important to be prepared. I beamed to the research desk, only one goal in mind: figure out a way to make better weapons. I didn't want to find out if throwing rocks and stabbing aliens with sticks would be good enough. As I was trying to calculate the most efficient way to craft a crossbow, Hugo suddenly ran to the shelter. He loudly greeted Han before grabbing an emergency ration from the pile. I tried to ignore him and stay focused on the task in hand, but he had to tell me what he had learned last night. Apparently, everyone else had been hard at work the whole night while I slept, and it was almost noon, and they still didn't seem tired. No wonder I woke up multiple times. Hugo told me that last night, he was gathering some scrap metal nearby with Han when he saw the bushes shaking next to him. First he thought that it was Han, but to his surprise, a huge animal beak revealed itself from the foliage.
I interrupted Hugo's story to yell that it had to be the same monster I saw yesterday. I knew I was rude to interrupt the story, but I only did it because I already knew that we had to defend ourselves against those beasts. But Hugo still continued. He said that he knew a thing or two about animals, and according to him, we shouldn't be worried about gujos. I questioned out loud his decision to name the creature, but then I remembered doing the same with the beefberries yesterday, so I went silent. Hugo didn't seem to realize that I had just shot my own foot with my own comments, so he just continued instead of harassing me about it. Finishing his meal, he said he tossed a few berries for the large bird, but it didn't seem to mind, so he figured the species must be carnivores. I didn't like it, and I already knew it, but still didn't like it. But for some reason, the bird didn't eat Hugo. I just hope it stays that way. Then I realized that I was sidetracked from the important research I was conducting. Hugo started to yawn, and before I knew it, he was already in bed. I thought that finally I'd get some peace to my work, but then Han showed up. I was going to tell him to shut up, but he just said that he wanted to celebrate being alive later tonight and went straight to bed. I didn't say anything because I wanted to stay focused, but considering the circumstances, I have to admit that things could be worse, way worse.
They got lucky. They got me. Again, I got lost in my thoughts and didn't notice that everyone was asleep. I still hadn't figured out how to craft weapons, and it felt like I was no closer achieving that either. I decided to think something else for a change.
And remembered how Hugo told he had wasted good edible berries. Wasted good edible berries while trying to befriend a big bird. Annoyed by this, I was determined to get us more food. I already should have started limiting how much we were allowed to eat each day. But alas, this hadn't crossed my mind until just now.
Now that I had daylight, I decided to go back where I was yesterday. Back where there were gujos. Maybe if I didn't disturb them, they would leave me alone. I adventured a bit further than last time, mostly because of the birds, and I managed to find it was like deja vu. I was so focused on analyzing the plant that until I changed my angle, I hadn't noticed this huge insectoid walking on nearby hill. Instead of freezing and running away in terror, I stayed. I had to. I kept my cool and hoped that if I pretended not seeing the four-legged monster, it wouldn't see me. So I stayed. I had to keep learning for all of our future. Then night fell, and I was still out exploring.
Then it came to me. Han mentioned that we were going to celebrate not being dead today. I guess I forgot it because I was a bit mad that they were sleeping while I was working, but I can see past that. At first, I thought not to participate, but in the end decided against it and headed back towards the camp. I didn't have it in me not to show up. What would they think of me then? What did I think of them? I haven't spent much time with any of them. I knew their names, Han, Hugo, and Nova, but I had no idea who they were. Han is optimistic, or at least he pretends to be. Hugo is kind-hearted, but I didn't know. Was this just how he was? Or was it because he was trying to manipulate us to do his bidding in a long run? And Nova, well, I didn't really like her. She seemed dangerous and unpredictable. I wasn't sure if she was mentally stable. Maybe I was even a little scared of her, but maybe everything would change over time. With all of them, I saw the light coming from the campfire and heard some talking, so I let out a sigh of relief. I was going to make it in time. As I was approaching the group, I noticed Nova staring at fire and not saying a word. It seemed that Hugo was the only one who was really having fun. As I walked past Han, I said to him that at least we were still on top of the dirt. I had no idea if he understood. No one else sure did. I noticed that my stomach started to growl. So, instead of sitting and chatting with the other survivors, I walked straight past them to eat some beefberries.
First, I felt bad for doing that, but as I sat down, I noticed that others were done talking. I guess they had nothing to talk about. It was a really good thing that I decided to come back then. I had only taken a couple of bites of my food when Nova sat next to me, but the way she decided to do that was frankly quite intimidating. I showed no fear, ate the rest of my berries, and thanked her for her company. Then I calmly stood up, told her that I had an urgent matter to attend to, and then I booked it. I had lost the sense of time, because now it was the middle of the night and I was back at the pumpkins. No overgrown insectoids to accompany me this time, luckily. I knew that I was rude to Nova. I mean, who just leaves like that? I didn't even want to be rude, it just happened. I have to make things right between us when I get back. And just then I heard thunder in the distance. Now I truly want anyone to send a rescue fleet. Well, maybe not whoever, but almost. And it was pouring down. And if the darkness didn't make me miserable, then the soaked clothes I was wearing and the freezing wind that had accompanied the rain did. But I persevered. Maybe I need to view everything in a more positive light. Although I have never been good at it. Well, at least there was light every now and then when a lightning struck something next to me. I stayed observing until the early morning hours. The wind was harsh and it was still raining. The thunderstorm was still nearby, but from its sounds, I could determine it was heading further away from me. I was hungry and tired and wet and cold, and I think my brain stopped working for a moment because I still hadn't fixed this miserable state I was in. But I did it. I found out that my hypothesis was correct, and this was basically a melon, and more importantly, it was edible. Yes, another discovery. Hopefully harvesting the existing melons will yield enough to last for a week. Because of their size, they will take longer to grow than beef berries. And because I was certain that others would think the raw, green, small melon to be edible, because it looked a lot like watermelon, I had to call the actual ripe version something else than a melon. So, I named them buttermelons. Even though I had already given my everything, I still didn't leave, but decided to harvest as much buttermelon as I could carry back. I had never felt such pain. The day had been mentally stressful and physically challenging, and I was all alone. Even the monsters ahead didn't scare me anymore. Well, I don't even know if those monsters were really there, because there was a euphoric Hugo running with them. In any case, I figured it was finally time for me to head back. I took a big pile of buttermelons with me and headed to the camp, but due to my frail state, I dropped them on the ground a few times. After some time, Hugo caught up to me. He said that he was worried about me. I tried to use my strength on walking instead of talking, but he was still catching up. I think he started to lecture me on leaving without telling the others what I was doing, especially when I was gone half a day. I told him that I really didn't have it in me to talk, but he kept on talking. First, he told me something about the weather on his home planet. It was still raining here, so it must have correlated to that. But as soon as the rain stopped and sun shined, he changed the subject to how pretty it was here. I just told him I didn't see it and hoped that was it. I managed to piss him off, on purpose, but I had to do it. For a long last, I was back at the camp. I was ravenously hungry and had just brought back food, so it was time to do a taste test. Unfortunately for me, as I sat down to eat, Han sat right next to me. After a few scoops of buttermelon, I looked him dead in the eye and shook my head. Then I shoved more food to my mouth. But to my dismay, he didn't get it and started talking. Luckily, what he had to say was short. He told me to look behind the shelter, on the side of the landing pod. We finished our meals around the same time, and I got curious. What was Han talking about? As I turned the corner, I didn't understand what I had just seen. I could do nothing more than walk closer to it, put my hands in the air and laugh. I felt immense joy while looking at this massive stone statue of the bird monster. I assumed that anyone could have seen that I needed rest, so that was just what I did. I had secured us sustenance for at least a week. I had battled the elements and won. I had researched a way to make us spears and crossbows. Wait, I actually never figured that out, but tomorrow, I'll have more time, and I will finish that. Now, let me just rest, just for a while.